We have lots of different types of wet specimens. Many of them are very old, but some of them are actually quite new. This specimen is one of our newest wet specimens. I think it's the newest wet specimen. It's a heart that came from a heart transplant patient who is still alive and doing great. His name is Rob. We're just going to use his first name. And what's great about this is we've actually been documenting the whole process ever since the heart came to us. So we were able to get the heart, we did an unboxing video, we got to see what that looked like, and then we have the heart now in the specimen jar. But a lot of really interesting things were going on between those two things. And this is Lowell, and he is our collections manager and registrar, but he also does conservation of our wet specimens as well. And what we decided to do was kind of walk you through what we had to do to transform this heart since it came out of the patient until it came into this jar. Like what happened? What kind of things did we do? So you saw the heart when it came to us from North Carolina, and they kind of vacuum packed it. I thought they were going to give us a kind of wet container, but they did a dry packing where they took the heart and they packed it in kind of wet formalin-soaked towels.
A little square.
In a square, put it in basically a Tupperware. But the big thing is they vacuum sealed that sucker so tight that when we opened it up, the heart had kind of assumed the shape of the rectangular Tupperware. So it didn't look anything like a heart. It kind of looked like very sad lunch meat.
Very appetizing. Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah.
All right, I apologize. But it honestly looked like those weird loaves in the deli counter that nobody ever actually orders. It had to go back to its original shape, and it didn't just spring back. What did you have to do to kind of get it back to its original shape?
Well, first, as a caveat, we'll see it's not totally back to its original shape. If you look closely, it's a little flat, but at least it expanded this way.
Yeah.
And the secret to that was mostly just getting it out of the packaging and allowing it to rehydrate. And basically approached this size merely in the formalin soaking stage. And then once we did the formalin into water, it got as big as it's going to get.
Did you have to do any extra formalin, like injections or anything like that?
Yeah, once we took it out of the box, I had a tray and I just moved it over and took a syringe, filled the syringe with formalin, and injected a few spots here and there where the tissue's the thickest, just to make sure it's fixed all the way through. Mm-hmm. And I injected it, left it in formalin for 24 hours in sealed Tupperware. After 24 hours in the formalin, I then moved it into water with an open top so the formalin could off-gas. And it sat in the water bath for 24 hours as well. And then after that, it started like an ethanol process where I first placed it in 25% ethanol, then 50%, then 70%.
Mm-hmm. It's important we have to step it up into the concentrations, because what would happen if you just went from like 0 to 60, you know?
If you were to just go straight into 70% ethanol, you'd have risk of precipitates forming that don't happen if you do it slowly. Mm-hmm. So even though it's more expensive, it's worth it usually to do a step so you don't get unexpected precipitate. And it also just gave it more time to rehydrate, and we left the top off for a long time to allow for as much off-gassing as possible during the ethanol stages. And I did 3 more changes of ethanol before we sealed it. And then once it seemed stable enough, I prepared this jar and put a plate of glass in there to give it the appearance of floating, and then sealed the lid with sensitive silicone. And it should be stable for a while now. We may reopen at some point because there's some fogging on the glass.
Yeah, I see something. It's. I mean, honestly, it's really not that bad. But I like that you pointed out the different. So there's different ways of mounting. A lot of our specimens are actually holes were put in them, and they were literally sewn to these kind of pipette scaffoldings. And that's fine. That's one way to do it. But then you're artificially putting a hole into a specimen, and then it's more susceptible to any vibrations and things like that, and of ripping and then falling. Because just to be very clear, specimens like this, they don't float. If you put them in a jar, they will sink down to the bottom unless you have some sort of structural support. By doing the glass, you don't have to put any holes in there. I would guess it's a minimally invasive mounting procedure.
That's my preferred.
And it really looks great. And to go back to having to inject it, I think that's important to note, because a heart is a muscle. It's got very dense tissue. So a soak sometimes wouldn't necessarily permeate all of it. But to add to that, which is interesting, is this is a heart from an individual that had acromegaly. So acromegaly being a hormonal disorder, one of the side effects is that your heart can become enlarged, but not in a good way, in a kind of hypermuscular, way that actually that's the reason why Rob needed a heart transplant. So his heart tissue is actually even more dense and more muscular. So it's very important that we had to do those injections to make sure that it was properly preserved, or else I'm guessing it could potentially start to decay from the inside out.
Yeah, and that's why we always make sure it's thoroughly injected.
Yeah.
And yes, contrary to the Grinch, if your heart expands to 10 times its size, you
Not a good
have a
thing.
problem.
Not a good thing. But it's another thing of note is you might notice it's cut here on the top, because they actually leave the top portion of the heart in the chest cavity and then put the new heart in along with it. So it's not like a full one-to-one, exchange. They still leave a little part of it in there. And that was really interesting in our discussions with the surgeons. They did warn me. They're like, by the way, it's not going to be a full heart, but it's still, I still think it looks very heart-like. And we also had to have a discussion with the pathologist, because any organ, any foreign body, pretty much anything that comes out of you at the hospital has to go through pathology, and they'll do lots of different things. Anything from completely slicing up the body part or the whatever and obliterating it to doing some minimally invasive things. So before we got the heart, we were in talks, lots of emails and letters going back and forth with Rob's medical team, and we had to make sure to have a very important conversation with pathologists to find out how much tissue they needed to take, where could they take it from that would be the least destructive. And because normally, when the heart is going to probably just go to the incinerator, they keep it for a little bit of a time, and then like a lot of medical waste goes to the incinerator. But for us, they were very nice, and they just did minimal incisions and minimal biopsies. So you can see here, this is actually the back of the heart. So you have the anterior is the front and posterior is the back. So this is the posterior section of the heart, I believe. I'm more of a heart tissue expert, but pretty sure that's what it is. And you can see they made an incision here and then multiple little incisions and cuts here where they took the tissue. And they did it for a variety of reasons. And again, to kind of get an idea of how damaged the heart was due to the acromegaly. So this is an amazing specimen. It's not only because of how it looks and the condition that it's in, but the story behind it. We are still in contact with Rob, and he had his heart transplant in the summer of last year. We received the heart back in, I want to say around July, and it's been here undergoing its preparation. And I'm just so excited to be able to kind of showcase the heart and tell the whole story behind it, because Rob has been very gracious enough to allow us to talk about his medical journey and to share information like that with us. And so that's why it's so important now to have this living donor program here, and we hope to collect more specimens like this with obviously the full consent and participation of the donor. That just adds such an amazing extra layer to the story.
A full narrative.
A full narrative, yeah.
A real benefit.
It is, I think, from an educational standpoint, but also my hope is that when you look at this specimen, it's not going to be just a heart. It's going to be Rob's heart and Rob's story. So it's the beginning of a different way to start looking at these specimens beyond just, this is the heart of a person with acromegaly. It's like, this is Rob's story.
This person.
Yeah.
A real
exactly.
flesh and blood person.
Yeah. And we're just so happy that, he allowed us to have access not only to his heart, but like I said, to his story. And hopefully, we'll keep you posted on his progress, and maybe we can even do an interview with him over Zoom or Skype or whatever those things are, and kind of continue this journey and keep you more informed about it.